What's up guys, Hunter Konechny here. Today we are talking the Carolina rig. The Carolina rig is one of my favorite ways to fish bottom. I've caught more fish on this than just, a lot of things over the years. So it's definitely one of my go-tos. You haven't seen me bust it out as much lately, but it is something I'm kind of doing in the background, and whether you see it on video or not, it's still one of my favorites. It's a big producer. I catch numbers on it and I catch quality, so summertime's a great time to do it. I thought it would be a great time to talk about it. Carolina rig, to keep it simple, the way that you tie this and kind of rig this up, you have your swivel, your hook, and your weight. So to start out, the order I like doing this, because that's important, especially if you're tying the Palomar knot like myself. That's just my favorite, easy to do, just the way that I like to do it. You have to do it in a certain sequence or you kind of get yourself in a pinch where you can't tie that last knot there. So I like tying my hook first, and then I'm going to give myself maybe like roughly a 3-foot piece of line is about what you need. So you pull 3 feet of line out, cut that off, tie your hook on, and then I tie my swivel to that piece of line with whatever leader length I want on there. So generally when I'm doing this, I'm going to keep that somewhere between 18 inches and 3 feet. Every once in a while you might go shorter, but most of the time 18 inches is about as short as I like to go. The other way, sometimes I will go longer with that though. So this does go through vegetation and trees in the water pretty good. So if you're trying to get your bait to kind of hover over the top of the trees while the weight's kind of sinking down in them, and it'll kind of go up and over and kind of flow through it all, then you can make that longer. So I've done it as long as 5 and 6 feet at times, but generally 18 inches to 3 feet is going to be kind of that sweet spot of where it's going to work best for you, and kind of where I keep it most of the time unless there's a unique situation. So you're going to tie that hook, you're going to tie your swivel on, and then you're going to take your line from your rod and you're going to feed your weight on there. So I like using anywhere from 1/2 ounce to 3/4 in most situations. If you're fishing a little bit shallower, you could go down to 3/8, or if you're fishing smaller baits, maybe down to 3/8, but the 1/2 to 3/4 is what I'm going to be using 99% of the time. So you put your weight on there, you put your bead, and then when you're tying your next knot, you can just make your loop a little bit bigger if you're using the Palomar, and you can pull your line and hook through all of it, and then you're still able to cinch it down like you're supposed to and everything's good. Or if you tied it like a San Diego jam knot or something like that, you can kind of eliminate that problem. And if you're tying a knot that's not the Palomar, where you have to be able to wrap it around the whole bait, then it doesn't really matter as much on the order. But if you're doing the Palomar, hook, swivel, and then you go over all of it to tie it to the main leader there. Next, I want to get into where I'm going to fish the Carolina rig. So this is something that really has a lot of possibilities and can be very versatile. So you can fish this a lot of different ways in a lot of different areas. Most of the time, I'm really going to be targeting rock with this. So really targeting that kind of deeper spectrum, so that this time of year in Arizona, so if you're in other parts of the country, this might be a little bit shallower for you, but like 15 to 40 feet is where I would be throwing this time of year. I'd say that 20 to 30 feet oftentimes is going to be the sweet spot where the majority of the fish are hanging out. But they can be a little bit shallower, they can be a little bit deeper, so you kind of just use either where you're getting the bites and using that as a tracker, or your electronics to figure out what depth they're in, and then you can kind of focus on that. So that's something that's super important as well, is knowing what depth they're in and really focusing on that. Where I like to fish it, like I said, is mostly going to be rocky stuff. So main lake points are going to be really good this time of year. So find that biggest obvious point on your lake. Usually there's going to be fish stacked up on that, and this is a great way to catch those deeper kind of lethargic fish that are just sitting down there. Humps are another good one. So any hump in 15 to 40 feet is something that I would definitely check out. If you find fish on there, if you catch fish, you see fish, this can be another good way to catch them. Ledges, another good offshore ledge can be a good one. So any kind of step down, it could be something as small as just a little 2-foot drop, it could be a 20-foot drop, but anything that's different than the bank that's around it can be something that they could really stack up on, especially the summer. So ledges are another good one. And then just kind of steep chunk rocky banks, like almost kind of what you can see in the background here. those can also be good. So you can kind of see we got like a point right here, there's a point right there, there's another point right there. But in between all of this, it's just kind of broken up. There's a lot of rock, a lot of different things that the fish can sit on. So just going down banks like this can also be a really good way to catch them. So you don't have to get too crazy, just normal summer fishing, just the points, the humps, the ledges, rocky banks. Just the key with this generally is going to be around hard rock bottom. You can catch them in wooded vegetation and things like that too, but this technique really shines more in the rocks, and you're kind of most of the time going to be mimicking crawdad type forage with this kind of bait rather than shad stuff or booga or anything like that. But there is ways to also do that, which I'll get to a little bit later. So the next thing, let's talk setup, and then we'll get to some of the baits, my favorites that I like using and what you'll see me use most of the time when I'm doing that. So the setup with this, for the rod, you're going to want an 8-footer if possible, and then you want a fast action and either heavy or extra heavy. So I'm going to say more times than not, extra heavy is probably going to be better for you. You can get away with a heavy though, so if you already have one, go ahead and use it. You're going to be fine. There's a lot going on with this technique, and I feel like just having a little bit stiffer rod I prefer over having a softer one. So 8-foot heavy or extra heavy is going to be about what you need. Having that 8-to-1 reel just allows you to get caught up to them easier and allows you to be more proficient with your hook set. So 7-to-1 also works fine, but if you can get an 8-to-1 specifically for this, I don't think you're going to regret it. So as far as line size, the cool thing about the Carolina rig is you have the flexibility to change what's actually on your leader versus your main line. So with that in mind, I oftentimes like to use a little bit heavier main line, and then I can dictate which light I'm fishing at, how clear the water is, and just different things that help influence my decision on the leader size while still having a strong main line. So generally what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw this on somewhere between 16 and 20 for my main line. And then for my leader line, it depends on how dirty the water is going to be the main factor there. But generally I'm going to do that on anywhere from 16 to 10. If I'm fishing dirtier water, there's a lot of bigger fish around, then I'm probably going to use more of the 16 side of things. And that just gives me an extra little layer of abrasion resistance, helps get through the rocks, things like that. Now, if I'm fishing more clear water, like Lake Pleasant, for example, and having lighter line is key to get those bites throughout the day, then I can drop that all the way down to 10. So this really gives some flexibility on catering to the situation that you have at hand. So dirty water, bigger fish, gonna be throwing it on heavier line, so probably 16. Fishing ultra clear water, and the fish are just finicky in general, then you can drop that all the way down to 10 if you need to and still get those bites. And the good thing is your strong leader or main line there is the one that's generally kind of going through the rocks and getting abrased if they are. So the one that's in the back doesn't necessarily need to be as heavy. And then just check your line from time to time. Dragging through the rocks, it can tear it up pretty quick, so make sure you're being on top of that. The next thing, I wanted to get into the different baits that I like using. So like I said, I've been an avid Carolina rig user for, forever really. That's one of the first techniques I learned and got proficient at, and it's been one I've used ever since. I've been doing this for 20 plus years now. So we're gonna kind of go through 5 different baits that are my personal favorites, and you can fit different ones in here and plug and play as needed as well. But to start out, I'm gonna start out with the one that I was showing you earlier. So it's really hard to beat just a standard baby brush hog. So this bait will catch more fish than just about any type of bait you can put on there. It's just a flat fish catcher. They're pretty inexpensive. They have a lot of good colors. Like, it's really hard to go wrong with that one. So I like, with most of these, I'm gonna just start that out in the beginning. I'm either gonna throw like a green pumpkin color like this, a watermelon color, and that pretty much covers most bases. So either green pumpkin, watermelon, you can throw the different candies, and like this is a green pumpkin blue flake, things like that, and they all work good. So just plug and play as needed for what your lake fits, but start off with that, you're not gonna go wrong. In the summertime, you can bump up to the full-size brush hog as well. So this is the baby, and that's what I'm gonna throw 90% of the time. But sometimes that full-size one can get bigger bites, and when they're aggressive like they are in the summer, especially some of those guys that are fishing back east, like the lakes in Texas and different places like that, I would say try that big one, because you might be surprised at times, because they'll eat that thing too. I've got plenty of fish on the big one. Moving down the list, another one. It's pretty hard to say which one's my favorite. They're pretty neck and neck, but the Yamamoto Creature is just one I have caught so many fish on over the years. It's got a ton of action without moving it a lot. It flat works. So the Creature's another good one. Same colors for that. I mean, it just gets it done. So another one, and this might be a little bit of an oddball for you. There isn't a ton of action with this one. This is just kind of a dead bait, but the Reaction Innovation Sweet Beaver, I have caught a lot of fish on that thing over the years. So it doesn't have the appendages and the movement and the things that the other ones have. It's just a dead bait just kind of swimming around back there. And every time you go over a rock, it'll just kind of flutter down and just moving slow behind it. But man, that thing works. So that's another good one. Caught plenty of fish on that over the years. Next one on the list. Pretty hard to talk Carolina rig without talking just a big curly tail worm. So this is a 10-inch power worm here, but 7-inch, 10-inch curly tail type worm. That's gonna be another fish catcher that just flat works, especially in the summer. And then if you guys are fishing nights, it's really hard to get a better bait fishing nights and dragging bottom than some kind of big curly tail worm like that. So that's another one you probably should be trying if you aren't already. I'm sure most of you guys are. And then lastly, this is something that maybe you guys are doing, maybe you guys have tried, but might be something you haven't thought of as well, because generally the Carolina rig, you're kind of throwing craw type bait. Another one that can really work good is a paddle tail swim bait. So this is a Kitech. If you throw like anywhere from like a 3.3 up to like a 4.3, that's gonna cover most bases. That's gonna be pretty close to what the bait size generally are, and man, those things can work. So if you think your fish are really keen on bait fish, and you wanna just throw something that's a little slower, maybe it gets through the cover a little bit better, that can be another really good option to just pick those fish apart and show them something maybe they haven't seen before in a way they haven't seen it. So I don't think there's really too many guys out there throwing the Carolina rig these days, and most of them probably aren't going to be throwing a swim bait on there. So that can be something that just gives you a little bit of an edge up over the guys that are also fishing your lake. So when you're fishing the Carolina rig, it's pretty easy to do. We kind of covered the areas you're going to throw it at. So you just throw it up at that point, hump, ledge, whatever you're fishing at. I like stripping some line right when it hits the water, and then you just let that thing sink to the bottom. So as soon as it's on the bottom, you're just gonna slowly pull that thing. So you move it like, I usually do like 2 to 3 foot pulls, and you're just kind of pulling, just feeling the rocks down there. And then you're just gonna pull again, reel your slack up, pull again, and you're just slowly working that thing down to the back to the boat. So very similar to fishing like a jig or a drop shot. You're not adding action to this, you're just pulling on it. When the bite happens, I'd say probably 7 times out of 10, you're gonna be pulling and you just feel that thump. Like standard jig bite, just any kind of bite where you're dragging the bottom, that just standard thump. So when you feel that, make sure you have enough line caught up where you're not already like at the end of the pull and you can't set the hook. If you have to reel some up, do that first. Set the hook, you should get that fish in the boat. This is a bait that really has a good hookup ratio as long as you set the hook pretty quick once they get it. The other option, you cast it out there, and a lot of times they're gonna do this when it's on the fall. It fell, you watch your line stop, everything's good, you pick it up, and then all of a sudden it just has like pressure on it, like just feels like there's a wet sock on your line. So that does happen from time to time, and if you feel that, you're gonna wanna kind of load up on the rod, make sure it's not stuck first, and then if it loads up and you've got a little bit of give to it, set the hook, because the fish bit it when it was on the fall. So that's the other way that it can happen. The last way they're gonna bite it is you fished your cast out, didn't get a bite, you're reeling your bait in, and you're just kind of burning it back to the boat. I've had a lot of fish come up and just smoke that thing halfway to the boat when you're reeling that thing in fast. So that can happen as well. And when that happens, I mean, they're just gonna boom, and then you're hooked up on them because you're already moving the fish or the bait fast. So if they do that, still kind of lean into them, but most of the time they're just gonna smoke that thing and you just got them. So I mean, there's been times at Saguaro where I've had like 6 and 8 pounders come and get that thing on the way back to the boat, and it's like, man, that'll get your adrenaline going pretty quick when they smoke it pretty close like that. But that's a little bit more rare. That's not usually how it's going to happen, but when they're just super aggressive, it does happen at times. So that's going to pretty much wrap up the Carolina rig. I mean, like I said, this is one of my favorite ways to fish bottom. I feel like I get more bites on this than I will with like a jig, for example. So it's got the numbers with it, and I still get bigger ones. So this is kind of a good middle of the ground where it's a little bit more aggressive than the drop shot, but I feel like I get more bites than when I throw a jig. So just good all around, and definitely something you should be throwing. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Make sure to like and comment. If you have any questions, anything like that, let me know. Subscribe to the page. There's going to be plenty more of these videos coming out. So if you have any video ideas, any topics you want me to cover, anything like that, let me know. I'd be happy to do so. We're going to keep these things going, trying to do 2 videos a week. So thank you guys for watching, and I hope you enjoyed it.